Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth webinar in our Business Insights from Women in Tech webinar series. My name's Claire Cox. I work on the sales and marketing team here at ScottLogic, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Manila McLean, Group CIO of Newcastle Building Society. If you've missed any of the previous webinars in this series, you can watch them all on the ScottLogic YouTube channel. And if you'd like to join us for the next in the series, we'll give you more information at the end of this webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, just pop it into the question box and we'll take as many as we can at the end. But let me now introduce you to today's speaker and give you a bit of background about their organisation. Newcastle Building Society is the largest building society in the northeast of England and has been helping customers save for 150 years. Newcastle Strategic Solutions is part of the society and is the UK's leading savings management platform, supporting the society and other UK banks and building societies in launching and growing their savings operations or in transforming the management of their existing portfolio. Manila McLean has over 20 years' experience in the financial services industry, leading digital transformation journeys for some well-known brands, and is passionate about building highly talented and collaborative teams to deliver technology solutions that customers will love using. She has an honours degree in computer science and management science from the University of Strathclyde, an MBA, and is a chartered management accountant, and they're just a couple of her badges and accolades. Outside of work, she's kept busy with her energetic 6 and 3-year-olds, her husband, Bruno the dog, who we might hear at some point through this webinar, who knows, and in her karate training. And during lockdown, I understand that the back garden has become her and her son's new dojo. So without further ado, let me hand you over to your presenter, Manila.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Claire, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the series. I've watched all of the other sessions, and I hope that this one is as good as some of the others have been as well. So with COVID-19, we're all united against something that threatens every one of us. While it's had enormous implications for how we go about our business, we've all dealt with it in different ways. I think I'm now in my 14th week of working from home, and I was very much previously a Monday to Friday in the office type of person. My experience through the crisis, whilst it has been challenging at times, it's been a lot easier than some, and I do count my blessings. There's actually been quite a lot of positives as well. This is a lovely photo that my husband took just a couple of weeks ago. We are very fortunate to live very close to the beautiful Northumberland coast, and this was an early morning shot where we visited one of our local beaches. I mean, throughout the lockdown, both my husband and I have been working full time from home, and we've got our daughter who's 3, who is full of mischief, and our son who's 6, and a massive Pokemon fan, and Bruno the dog, who Claire has already mentioned as well. So we've been kept very busy for the last few months, I would say. We're all going to have our own views and opinions of what we want and what we expect from the future to look like. Some of the changes that we've seen as a result of the crisis we'll want to keep, and others will be desperate to ditch, I have no doubt. I'll share my views on some of the key topics that have been on my mind, and how I expect them to pan out over the coming months. When the pandemic was first declared by the World Health Organization, and we had the reference points of China and Spain and Italy to point to, I think that the general awareness that we were entering into a crisis was there, but that it was maybe last a few weeks as opposed to the months that it's turning into. Partly because we didn't appreciate just how bad it was going to become, but but also from a self-preservation point of view, to allow ourselves to gradually accept that life was, as we knew it, wouldn't be the same again. I think as the weeks have turned into months, people's general expectation of when this is all going to pass has got longer and longer. Many people are very wary of a second wave, which we potentially are starting to see in parts of China just now. And we believe that only a tried and tested vaccine will eradicate the threat and let us move on from the current restrictions that we're all in. It's clear that the transition back to work life is going to be a slow one. There's a body of evidence that suggests that cases of the virus will need to be near zero and a vaccine available before people will feel really comfortable. And I think that is completely understandable. So a post-COVID life, I think, is still some way off. But life does go on, and we do adapt and we change and we evolve, and many things will actually be better, I do believe. So I'm going to share with you some of my theories on how I think things will change for us, and I'll focus on the work perspective. So we've seen many workplaces respond with incredible pace throughout the crisis for their employees and for customers. At Newcastle Building Society, we were predominantly office-based before the pandemic. We had two main offices with over 1,200 colleagues and 31 branches across the region that we operate in. An important part of our business is the provision of the contact centre service for our customers and for the customers of the many other banks and building societies who utilise our platform. We have around 200 to 300 colleagues who work in the contact centres, and because of the investment that we had made in technology previously, we were able to enable remote working incredibly quickly, including for the contact centre colleagues. I mean, we had to rush to buy a batch of laptops for colleagues who were unable to use personal devices, but the vast majority remote working was enabled through bring your own device technology. We've been able to keep our branches open throughout the crisis. We've adapted them to meet with social distancing measures, to keep colleagues and customers safe, but it was an essential service that we've been able to keep open throughout the period. I think every friend and family member that I've spoken to, most of the businesses that they work in have achieved as much to a greater or lesser extent. All of them have accelerated their adoption and focus on technology. But one thing that I think every single one of them has said is that they want and they expect a much more flexible and remote working option going forward. But before the pandemic, many businesses struggled with truly embracing flexible working. And I think for those of you that have worked in flexible working environments, who have embraced it and who have seen it work, will have thought, well, yes, of course it does, and why would it be a surprise? But through this experience, it became employers' obligation that if they could enable colleagues to work from home, that they should. And I think what that has achieved is that it's really broken down some of those perceived barriers and the fears that employers have had. Remote working is more than just giving your colleague a laptop. You also need to help people adjust to a different way of working. When you're predominantly office-based, there are clear boundaries between your personal life and your working life. When you're working from home, those boundaries are less obvious, and I think that we do need to support people to adjust to that way of working. I might have a slightly biased audience here, given that this is about Women in Tech series, but not everybody is as comfortable with technology. And in fact, I know our technical help desk had calls from colleagues who had become quite overwhelmed with using a basic Chromebook rather than the desktop and the monitor that they'd used for 5 years. So the help desk are used to dealing with tech calls, not so much with emotional support calls, but that's been a learning point, and our colleagues have been incredibly empathetic and supportive of their colleagues as they've dealt with that type of demand. In our development area, we operate in Scrum teams. We've always put a great emphasis on co-location of multidiscipline teams. And to be honest, I did worry about initially what the impact would be on remote working. I think because our teams had already been operating very well, they adjusted to remote working easier. They were very supportive of one another as they got into their new rhythm. They got used to using video conferencing and collaborating and socialising as well, with sort of like happier on a Friday night. Being flexible and adaptable and embracing change are skills that will be even more important going forward. We've seen businesses during the crisis remodel themselves almost overnight. You know, there's the examples of gin production who moved to hand sanitizers, and clothing designers producing PPE, teachers delivering virtual lessons. And building on the learning of the last 3 months, I think the office space will become more of a specific collaboration, used for collaboration exercises, used as for creative space, and having face-to-face connection is important. And people in the main are hardwired for social interaction, and many of us have really missed the absence of this in our working lives over the past few months. But the opportunity to work flexibly and remotely, using the power of tech to stay connected and allowing you the flexibility of getting your head down to focus and concentrate away from the interruptions of the office is a great combination. I know a lot of my developers really want that balance. So when they're in the office, they're not just sitting with their headphones on. I think some employers will possibly struggle with it and try and hold on to the way things used to be. But I don't think they'll fare well with that, as employees will want to retain the benefits of flexibility. So is remote working here to stay? I absolutely think it is, and I don't think people will see it as a perk of the job anymore. I think they will see it as a need to have, and an expectation. The different ways of working that we've now all proven to be effective, create opportunities going forward for more flexible, more impactful, and more inclusive ways of working. And when the time comes, I do think that a phased return to work will be what we'll see. Employers will need to thoroughly think through what the office setup will look like to adapt to social distancing and deal with new guidelines. In many organisations throughout the crisis, we've seen an increased pace of delivery and change, and we've very quickly seen multidiscipline teams being spun up and being able to work together to achieve tasks by focusing on them and streamlining governance so that it's working for them rather than being a blocker. Teams have been given the scope and the autonomy to make sharp decisions, and they'll want to keep that I've definitely seen that in my own business. We've had a session in the last week or two with our most senior leaders from across the business. There's about 40 on the call, and in response to one of the questions, which was, how do you retain the pace of change that we've seen, one of our colleagues, Laura, had said that with anything that we do, there needs to be a very clear alignment to strategy and purpose, and we mustn't try to do too much at once or accept change through a side door. We want a clear, quick decision-making process, and we want the empowerment and the accountability for those decisions to be fully embedded as well. I don't think that will be an uncommon wish from leaders across organisations, and I think we'll see a movement to much more accountability throughout the businesses. What worked well for us during the crisis is we had the right data to understand the impact that the crisis was having, but also the impact that the decisions of those agile teams was having. We very quickly enabled a daily dashboard for the executive team, which provided a range of data on information on customers, on colleagues, financial positions, technology, and so on. And that is incredibly important, that you have the right data to hand as well to understand the impact. So I think, I mean, how can we ever tell ourselves that we can't be faster? We've proven that we can, and we certainly don't want to go back. So at this point, I'm going to hand to Claire, because I'm keen to run a quick poll question to get your views on this particular point.
Thanks, Manila. So you should now see this poll on your screen. So the question that we're asking is, what do you expect your ways of working to look like post-COVID-19? Now, I'm only going to give you about 30 seconds to get your votes in here. So your choices are similar to how it was before, more of a balanced split between remote and office-based, significantly more remote working, or completely new operating model. So I can see lots of votes coming through at the moment. 65% of you have voted, 70% of you have voted. I'm going to give you just a few more seconds, and then I'm going to close this poll and share the results with you. So you should see the results there on the screen. What do you think, Manila? Is that what you expected to see?
I'm not seeing the screen. What's it telling me, Claire? Don't keep me in suspense. Can you
not see the results? Okie dokie, right, let me tell you. So nobody has said it's similar to how it was before. 43% have said more of a balanced split, and 43% have said significantly more remote working. Only 14% have said a completely new operating model.
Yes, no, I'm not surprised at all by those results. I'd love to hear more actually from the 14% that think a completely different way of working. I'm sure that there are some fantastic ideas that will be in that 14%. So if we have a chance at the end for Q&A, then it would be good to explore that in a bit more detail. But no, not surprised. I think that meets my own expectations. Okay, so I think that in the long term, the change to the pattern of business travel, I think will be significantly different. I mean, I can't imagine that we would go back to the ways of or the volume of domestic and international business travel that we've seen at the start of the year. I think that's going to have a huge impact on the travel industry. There's a couple of examples that I have. So my next door neighbour works in oil and gas, and he was a frequent business traveller to Norway. And I was just chatting to him the other day, and he said that most of their offices throughout the UK and Norway have been closed permanently for in favour of home working. A good friend of mine, a couple who work with British Airways, Russell was a pilot, Claire works in cabin crew, that they're preparing their expectations that both of them may be out of work. For Russell, the expectation is that BA will bring their 747s into early retirement, possibly ground their A380s indefinitely, which is the planes that he flies mainly to the Far East. So while there will be downsides to all of this, changes in working patterns have created the potential for wider talent pools. When candidates will demand and expect flexible working as a given and not a benefit, like I said earlier. And I hope and I do believe that a more flexible workplace will attract more female talent into digital and tech roles. We've just resurrected a recruitment campaign in digital and tech after pausing for several weeks to focus on responding to the crisis. And we're already seeing a better split in the gender mix of applicants. It's not equal at all, but right now I have a very male dominant split within the function, and I would like to see more of a gender balance and more diversity in general. I think by organisations offering more flexible working, we will help to attract candidates who perhaps wouldn't have applied in the past. So we may start to see a breakdown of the geographical and personal barriers that will make work more accessible for people. This could be the leapfrog moment for greater gender diversity in tech and tap into a much broader talent pool in general. Another positive for more flexible working is the impact on absence rates, with businesses reporting a significant reduction throughout lockdown. There is definitely a correlation between flexible working and absence rates. I mean, of course, during this particular example, we've not been interacting with people in the same way, so therefore we've not been spreading germs to one another. So you do need to take that into account, but nevertheless, I do think that there will be a positive impact for absence rates in general if we get the balance right. Because I think if the home working was to be prolonged significantly, then there are impacts on mental health and mental well-being that we may start to see increasing. The change in working patterns and the rise in remote working puts even more emphasis on leadership. There is a greater focus and a need for communication, engagement, and importantly, empathy. We significantly increased our volume of authentic communication, meaningful communication and engagement with our colleagues. We're doing much more written updates. We're doing weekly live Q&A sessions with senior leadership where colleagues have the opportunity to pose questions that they want answers to. I mean, that in itself has multiple benefits. Well, firstly, it gives colleagues the opportunity to get the answers to the questions that they have, but it also helps to leaders to understand what is on the minds of colleagues, and it helps to shape the future narrative and plans. Of course, with using platforms like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or so on, you can spin those types of things up really quickly and for a much wider audience. It will be really important coming out of the pandemic for organisations to continue to use those platforms and opportunities, and also to give clarity to their colleagues on what is the future for their business, because people will be uncertain. If it's changed, how has it changed? if it's staying the same, reaffirm that. I think will be very important. I think for all of us, the situation has driven an increased need to really empathise with our teammates, because people are dealing with all sorts of challenges right now. It's not just the working lives, and as we start to come out of this, there is a need to continue to make people feel safe, feel protected, and supported. And as an organisation, our journey through the crisis has been marked by an emphasis on the mental health of colleagues. For some, the changes that we've experienced as an organisation have had a really positive impact, and for others less so. We've needed to be very mindful of that throughout all points. Through the rapid shift and moving to conference calls, moving from conference calls to the expectation of video calls, we're inviting our colleagues, our suppliers and our stakeholders, we're inviting them into our homes. We're getting glimpses of each other's lives that we never did in the past. Most of my colleagues now have met my children, have met my dog, and it's clear some people are really comfortable every day with the camera on, and others just find it really awkward. Of course, daily video conferencing brings its own risks of faux pas. You'll maybe have seen the one at the beginning of the pandemic where the girl obviously forgot that her camera was still on and she took the Zoom meeting into the bathroom with her. Or where you think that you're messaging one person and you accidentally message the entire group that you're having the video meeting with. I'm sure you'll have your own stories as well. We've seen throughout the crisis some examples of fantastic creativity to solve problems. Things from the dedicated 1 hour opening of the supermarkets for vulnerable groups. There's the companion cards that a couple of banks created for carers who were supporting people who were shielding, who wouldn't be able to go out and do their own shopping. So I think there will be more of an expectation to generate creative ideas on any scale. A lot of what we do in digital and tech requires creative thinking, and whether that's in product development or building solutions, and much of that creative spark comes from the office environment. To be honest, I don't think you can fully recreate that remotely. You can't replace that creative spark that you get when you're bouncing ideas around and you're feeding off one another, standing beside a board or a wall and so on. So going back to my point about increased flexible working, it'll be really important to get that balance right. Like I was mentioning earlier, not every business is going to survive this. There are seriously tough times ahead for many organisations and therefore ultimately for individuals. But for others, there is a feeling of being better off. For individuals, outgoings have been generally reduced in the last few months. We've not had the same commute costs, we've not been paying clubs and subscription fees, we've not been going to sporting events or concerts, holidays have been cancelled. Businesses have been impacted because of that, yes, but in a survey that I read recently, nearly a quarter of individuals said that they felt better off. And I wonder if there will be a pent-up demand to splurge, or has everybody had their fix through their daily Amazon deliveries, or have they just become accustomed to spending less? I'm really keen to hear your views again, so let's just go to another quick poll to share with one another. What do you think? your spending habits will look like.
So here we go. I'll launch the poll now. So your question is, what will your spending be like post COVID-19? So your choices are, I'm going to go on a spending spree, I'll be much more frugal and considered with my spending, or I'll have similar spending behaviours as I had before. So it's about a 50-50 split at the moment. I won't tell you between which two. I'm just going to give you a few more seconds. Most people have voted now. In fact, it changed from being 50-50 and it's gone back to 50-50. So I'm going to close the poll now and share the results with you. Let's see if anyone's going to go on a spending spree. So there you go, there's the results. No one's going to go on a spending spree, and it's a 50-50 split between being frugal and considered and having similar behaviours to what they had before.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I expected actually. So interesting. Thank you for sharing. Digitisation across many industries it's going to accelerate as customers' demand continues to rise. Because of the economic impact, there is going to be a big focus on efficiency and reducing cost pressures within businesses. And although not solely, it will be technology will play a very big part in achieving that through automation, through AI, through digitisation. And for those of us who work in tech, this is a really exciting time and will present many opportunities. And I do expect that we'll see an increase in roles within designing and developing new software, digital experiences, architects figuring out how to deliver capabilities faster, data scientists to understand how people are engaging and behaving. And that will ultimately lead to a reduction in more administrative roles across sectors. It's also about how we work and ensuring that governance works for us in delivering those initiatives and having a clear focus and autonomous teams to get on and deliver. And we've seen a significant rise in contactless solutions, even post-COVID. I think that will continue. It was the trajectory that we were already going on. I was on a webinar last week with representatives from the payments industry, and they were talking about the rise in people putting cash through the washing machine in an attempt to stop contamination. So it's quite a different approach to money laundering there. But taking the cashless society as a concept, there are clearly some groups who still use cash, but others who can't think of anything worse than touching cash that's been in a million people's hands. And personally, I preferred using contactless for years and usually just with Apple Pay. I hadn't touched my purse in months, and was embarrassed the other night when I went to the supermarket and what I bought went over my contactless limit, and I could not remember my PIN. But I think we'll definitely see an acceleration in contactless and digital experiences. And another observation that I've made is how we've all come together as communities in support of one another to try and beat the virus. As humans, we are tribal, and it's given us a common goal that I think as organisations communicate with colleagues and with customers, it will be even more important to connect on an emotional level for the good of the group, and as a result, people will continue to support for that. There's been a real domino effect across industries as a result of this particular crisis. Some countries have been less impacted because some governments have responded better, but it has affected all of us. Most crises would typically affect a geographical area, a sector, or a company, but this one has shown us that huge, unimaginable events are possible and unfortunately are likely to happen again. But the next time, it could be a cyber attack, it could be a widespread computer virus, So when we think about future-proofing and the rise in digital and tech, it will be even more important to think about resilience. I think another positive to come out of this is the amount of collaboration that we've seen across sectors, really because it's a crisis that we've all been focusing on working on, you know, when we've had that shared goal. It's had a really positive impact for all of us by that collaboration and working together. You know, for example, my CEO has weekly calls now with the CEOs from across businesses within our sector, and I hope those types of behaviours continue where appropriate as we go forward. Behavioural science and evolutionary psychology will tell us that we're creatures of habit, therefore we will go back to doing a lot of things that we've always done in ways that we've always done them. We can't help ourselves. But 3 months of lockdown have certainly shone a light that's been helpful and interesting on understanding a lot of different ways of working. And on how we treat ourselves and how we treat other people. And that in itself can only be a good thing. So as we go forward, the key to acting and reacting to the impacts of COVID-19 will be to remain flexible, to keep an eye on what's happening and to react accordingly. Having said all of that, I mean, how reliable are any predictions? Just a few months ago, I'm pretty sure I didn't read any predictions that said we were about to enter into a global pandemic and throw all of our lives up in the air. So who really knows what the next 6 to 12 months will look like? But just to wrap up, I'd like to quote a Danish philosopher, Søren, I'm going to struggle with the name, Søren Kierkegaard. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Claire, if we have time for a couple of questions, could I hand over to you to facilitate, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Manila. I know that this is a topic that's on everybody's mind at the moment, so I really thank you for your time today to come and talk to us and share your thoughts on this. If you could just flick to the last slide there so that I can give details of the last in this series that's coming up next week, that would be great. And also just to mention, Manila's very kindly offered to participate in a panel discussion that we're going to hold to close this series on the 15th of July, where we're going to talk about some of the issues around diversity in the tech industry. So thanks for that, and I look forward to speaking to you again then, Manila. So just to point out the details of the next webinar, so that is on the 30th of June at 10 o'clock. We're going to be joined by Lee Kwan Taylor, who is the co-head of digital platforms at NatWest, and she's going to talk to us about leading technology teams when you're the only female in the room. So I hope that you can join us then, and there's the link to register on your screen now. So I'm glad that I've waffled for a few minutes there, because we've got some questions coming in, which is great. I'm very mindful that we've gone over time, so if you need to drop out, you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to watch this back. Or to forward on to colleagues who might want to watch this also. So I'm going to take just 2 questions. The first one, I don't know whether this is somebody in one of your teams, Manila, but it says, do you think a shift to remote working will affect remuneration?
Oh, do you know, I've not heard that question at all in any of the conversations I've had. I don't think so. I think we've seen a continued demand for the growth in I'm thinking particularly about digital and tech, you know, and I'm assuming that that's the majority of the audience that we have here. I think because I do expect that there will be a growth in demand for digital and tech talent coming out of this, because there will be a big focus in automation and driving the digital agenda, that I think that we'll see a continued rise in the salary expectations within that type of sector. But so for other roles, honestly, I don't know. I've not considered that one. So that's quite a thought-provoking question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take one more question. And this one says, as a CIO, have you had to change the focus of your project portfolio as a result of COVID? Perhaps a focus on infrastructure rather than software?
We spent quite a lot of investment in actually focusing on infrastructure and some, the framework and the basics around technology. So actually, for our agenda as an organisation, it's more around the application architecture and the software experience for customers, the digital experience for customers, and the applications to support our colleagues. So I think for us, it's more about the enabling the experiences as for the next phase of our journey.
That's great. And that's all we've got time for today. So as I say, I hope you can join us for the next webinar on the 30th of June. But for today, I just want to thank you again, Manila, and thank everybody for joining us. And we hope to see you again. Enjoy your day.